Absolutely disgusting allegations come out against Maine's Graham Platner, and Democrats scramble to try to find a replacement. Donald Trump somehow finds a way to ruin the World Cup and the U.S.'s 250th anniversary. I show you what TDS actually looks like. All that plus an awesome interview with South Dakota's Nikki Gronley, who's running for the U.S. House of Representatives. You are not going to want to miss this episode. Welcome to the PolyPolitics Show. Welcome to the PolyPolitics Podcast. I'm your host, Christopher Turner, where opinions are challenged and facts matter. A place for honest conversations and unfiltered perspectives. New allegations against Maine's Graham Platner have just come up, and they are absolutely disgusting. Now, Graham Platner has already had some things come up against him, including some other talks about some sexual harassment, a tattoo that represented white supremacy that he claims he didn't know, that's what it meant when he got it. But this new stuff is absolutely disgusting and absolutely horrible. They are from one of his exes who described in detail how he forced his way into her house, how he forced his way upon her, how she told him to stop and he would not. There are text messages, there are emails, there are, things from her current partner, there are things to her therapist that she has written down, all right? These things cannot be tolerated, all right? And you know what? Maybe there should have been warning signs prior. Maybe some of the stuff that's come up against Graham Platner earlier should have been warning signs that this was the person that he was. But I do want to commend Democrats because his endorsements have been falling out of the sky. Like, they've just been going away left and right and left and right. Nobody's sticking by this guy anymore. He's refusing to drop out at the time of this recording. But I'm sure that is coming soon. Now, Democrats have to replace him by the 13th or they can't replace him at all. But I want to be very, very clear. When it comes to sexual misconduct, when it comes to stuff like this, Republican, Democrat, left, right, it does not matter. These things need to be met with the most aggressive disowning, the most ostracizing language that we can possibly say, okay? Now, does this mean that everyone is going to be perfect, that we are not going to pick candidates in the future that don't have these things come up later? Absolutely not. But it means that when it's found out about, this needs to be attacked with full force, okay? Graham Platner is a disgusting human being. All right. The fact that he hasn't dropped off at the time of this recording, I think, is disgusting. These allegations are absolutely disgusting. We need to believe people when they say these types of things. Okay. Because if we don't, what we end up is a situation like Donald Trump. Now, Republicans are claiming, oh, yeah, when this comes up against us, we do something about it. Bullshit. Let's not forget that Donald Trump has been adjudicated in court for sexual assault against E. Jean Carroll. And the Supreme Court just told him to screw off and that he has to pay her for that. Okay. But this is not a Democrat or Republican thing. This is not a left or right thing. Okay. The sexual misconduct specifically from men, but across the board, but specifically from men against women, has to stop. Now, there was previous allegations that came up against Graham Platner, and she got a whole bunch of stuff that I don't believe that she should have gotten because, she was a Republican, because she disagreed with him. People were calling her a plant. I never believed that, all right? I haven't supported this guy in general. But regardless, all right, when are we going to get to the point in the United States where we believe women? Period. When are we going to get to the point? Now, I don't know when that's going to be, but we're seeing it time after time after time after time after time after time of people that have nothing to get out of it. There's no win for them. There's no nothing. They have nothing to get out of it. Making these claims that don't help them at all, that put them in the spotlight, right? That make attacks go against them. Like, I saw specifically in this article that her current partner won't even have his name released because he's afraid of attacks. Or the therapist won't have their name released because of fear of these attacks, all right? These attacks should not happen. Every case should be addressed independently. Every case, we should look at the evidence. Every case, we should decide what the right thing to happen in that case is. And I'm not trying to say that we should talk about all of these in a monolith, all right? But when are men going to stop being put in positions of power when they commit these sexual harassment, sexual assault, and then have not one of these things? And that's the crazy. It's not one of these allegations. It's multiple. It's one after another, after another, after another, after another. Because these predators never stop at one. They never stop at one. Okay? I don't care if the Republicans win Maine. I don't give a flying anything whether Republicans win Maine. What I care about is putting people, regardless of whether they're Democrat, Republican, left, right, Libertarian, Green Party, I don't care what party you're in. What I care about is those people being somewhat of moral, upstanding people. And I'm not saying we go to pearl clutching. I have been very, very clear on my channel that I do not believe we should pearl clutching. Oh, somebody stole a candy bar when they were a kid. We can't vote for them for office anymore. No, that's not what I'm talking about. I am talking about serious allegations. Donald Trump was on camera saying, grab him by the hoo-ha. That he's on camera saying that. He's on camera saying, oh, I have sex in common with my daughter. But yes, people still voted him in. All right. And if this allegation hadn't come out right at the time that it did, I'm pretty sure people would still be voting for Graham Platner in the same way. This is not a left or right problem. This is a problem in the United States where we're dealing with men getting away with sexual misconduct in our country and nobody believing the women that the sexual misconduct is against. And this has to stop. This has to stop.
The one thing I know about Republicans, when we had a very bad candidate and found out, we didn't vote for that person. Right. We walked away.
For better or for worse.
Yeah. When Matt Gaetz came forward, we got rid of him.
Yeah. Kevin McCarthy, as always, great to see you.
I don't know how Kevin McCarthy said that with a straight face. I really don't. I don't know how he said that with a straight face after who he supports, after who he's gone to bat for multiple times. But this has to be an issue. This has to become an issue. The people that do things like this should be terrified to even think about running for office or holding a position of power, because they should know. They should know beyond a shadow of a doubt. They should know that it will be found out, that the people are going to come forward, that no one should have a fear of coming forward when they have this type of information, that they're not going to get judged, that they're not going to be destroyed by the media or people on their political side. They should know that it is okay to come out against people like this. I think it's absolutely disgusting. I hope not only does Graham Platner drop out of this race and never hold a political office in his entire life, but I hope that they take him to court for this, and whatever the justice looks like in these types of situations in Maine, I hope that happens to him. This is absolutely disgusting. And if that means that a Republican wins in Maine, so be it. Is what it is. Okay? Is what it is. We have to be able to put moral high ground over party politics. Period. In dot. TDS, Trump derangement syndrome. I have been told that I've had it so many times, I think I've actually lost count at this point. And people use it in this way. Oh, you just have Trump on the brain. Trump does all these amazing things and you just don't want to give him credit for it. I want to show you what Trump derangement syndrome actually looks like. And it's not from the people that you think. It's from his supporters. It's from his supporters who just for some reason, no matter what he does, just want to give him credit regardless. Okay, just regardless. Here is an example, and I'm going to play this video. Here is an example of someone who put $40,000 into Trump's coin because he's like, oh, if Trump backed it, if Trump's sons backed it, then it must be making money. There's no way the president would just be grifting his coin off of us, right? There's no way that's happening. Lost it all and still wants to blame Democrats. Watch this video.
These are two investors into the Trump coin, and these are Trump supporters. If Trump was putting his name behind it, it must be a legitimate investment. This is a woman who spoke to Reuters. She put $2,000 of her savings into the Trump meme. At the end of May, her Trump holding was worth less than $120. She now thinks it was just a pump and dump scheme. The second investor, Matt, a 45-year-old machinist in Indiana, put $40,000 into Trump family tokens. When a stock has presidential backing in a way, at least from his sons, you would think it would go up. Matt's shares have dropped 79% in value since he bought them for a loss of about $32,700. He does not blame the Trump family. He said he believes Democrats and anti-Trump investors are taking short position.
It's kind of laughable. It's kind of, if it wasn't so insane, it would actually be funny. This guy lost all of his money. And Donald Trump made, $1.4 billion in crypto just last year, right? All of that $32,000 that guy made went directly into Trump's pocket. Trump is admitting that it went directly into Donald Trump's pocket. And this guy's like, oh, it's probably the Democrats. That is what Trump derangement syndrome looks like, okay? That's what a cult sounds like. When somebody literally robs you blind, sticks their hand in your pocket, takes your money, puts it in theirs, and says, oh, it was the Democrats that did it. And you're like, yep, that makes sense. That makes a whole lot of sense. That's probably what happened. This is absolutely crazy talk, and it's not the only person. That's not the only person. Oh, prices go up? Must be the Democrats, right? Oh, like, whatever, you name it. Oh, we're at war, it must be Democrats. And like, it's not even a matter of being Democrats. It's the fact that Donald Trump is specifically doing this stuff. He's enriching himself and then blaming other people. And the people who are literally getting hurt the most by this are the people that are most likely to support him. SNAP benefits go away. Who has the largest, concentration of SNAP benefits, like, per population in their states? Red states. Medicaid funding slashed. Who has the highest concentration of people on Medicaid? Red states per capita, right? Those are the people that are like, oh yeah, Donald Trump's doing other stuff against all these other people. It must be the immigrants. They are literally being robbed and supporting their theft. I don't know what kind of, maybe y'all are from some different place than I am, okay? Where I'm from, you don't thank the person that robbed you, okay? But again, it is a lot of that media atmosphere, right? Listen to these people talk about how they left MAGA, leaving MAGA, right? Like it's a cult, like no joke. Talking about how they didn't even understand what happened on January 6th until like a partner of theirs or somebody else had them turn off Fox News for a second. They were like, oh, is this reality? Let's play the clip.
When you heard Trump claim that the election had been stolen, were any of you like, yeah, they stole this election, Trump won?
Yeah. I did believe that the election was stolen. I believe that the riots were actually, those were patriots. Until I actually switched off Fox News and started getting my news from other places, my information, that's when it finally hit.
Diversifying their news turned out to be a common factor in leaving MAGA.
I met my now husband in 2021, and they made me watch a documentary on January 6th, and I didn't even know what happened on January 6th prior to the PBS documentary. And I looked at him and I said, Scott, did that really happen? And he was like, where have you been?
The media atmosphere that MAGA lives in is just like a revolving door, right? They just walk around in circles. And for y'all that don't watch Fox News as much as I do, I have to, unfortunately, because how else would I be able to tell you guys what they're saying, all right? You can watch and you can go, wow, they're not even trying to cover this correctly. They're not even trying. And if that's the entire media ecosystem that you live in, then you know nothing else. You see it on social media sites. You see it just the same thing gets keep fed and fed and fed and fed and fed to the point where it becomes a cult, right? Where I've heard people talk about how their family disowned them when they left. Okay, how their friends didn't want to talk to them after they left this cult. Their entire identity is revolved around an 80-year-old man and MAGA. That's it. Their entire identity. It has nothing to do with truth, logic, facts, evidence. You could show people that all the time, and they won't get it. It doesn't matter because it's their identity that is tied to MAGA. Okay, and when MAGA's over, it'll move on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. As long as this media atmosphere continues to just be a revolving door, as long as it continues to just cycle people into whatever feeds their crazy thoughts, regardless of evidence or facts or critical thinking, we're going to continue to see things just like this. And I hope for their sake that they're able to get out of it. All right, I hope for their sake they're able to get out of it. Politics should not be like supporting a sports team. You shouldn't have flags. You shouldn't have, t-shirts and hats, right? You should be supporting policy that helps you. And the second that policy stops helping you or that party stops helping you, then you should stop supporting them, period. And again, this is not a Democrat or Republican thing. This is for anybody out there. If there are Democrats or Republicans that are pushing policy that is not helping you, then why are you still voting for them? Why are you still voting for them? I don't know. When I found out that the World Cup was coming to the United States and it was going to be this year and the United States qualified and everything, I got super excited. I have been a U.S. soccer fan for a very, very long time. I was so excited. And I told myself, I was like, I am not going to let Donald Trump ruin the World Cup for me. I'm not going to let it happen. I am going to enjoy the World Cup even with Donald Trump being at games and everything, I don't care. I'm going to enjoy it. I hope we make it really, really far. And yet he couldn't stay out of it. He couldn't stay out of that. For y'all that don't know, the leading striker of the United States, okay, Balogun, great player, is here because of birthright citizenship. That's a whole other conversation that we need to talk about. We don't need to talk about. We'll leave that for the moment. He ended up getting a red card, right? And the red card, ended up in a suspension that made him ineligible to play against Belgium. Well, Donald Trump decided to make a phone call and try to get that red card overturned or suspended, right? Which he succeeded in doing. Even the head of FIFA came wearing a MAGA hat to the game.
This game would have a big mark on it. If we lost, if we won, no matter what happened, you have to let them use their best players. And the game tonight's going to be amazing, and we're going to have a full team, and Belgium's going to have a full team. And you know what? If they beat us, then they can be really proud. The other way, if they beat us, we'll say it was rigged, just like the election was rigged in 2020, but I won't get into that.
And as soon as I heard that happen, I was like, we are so screwed, because no matter what Donald Trump touches, it just turns to shit. He is the opposite of the Midas touch. It all turns to shit. And what happens? The United States gets their absolute ass whooped by Belgium. Absolutely embarrassing goals. The United States looked like an embarrassment on the world stage, even though every single other game that they played looked absolutely amazing. They looked like they could win the whole thing. This goes back to the Knicks game, right? This goes like Donald Trump shows up to one Knicks game, they lose. Okay? Every other game the Knicks won. The one game Donald Trump shows up to, they lose. Okay? And I don't know whether it was pressure on the U.S. team. I don't know if the Belgian team just got so motivated after feeling like they were slighted. I don't know what happened, but it was absolutely embarrassing. Here's a video of the Belgian players making fun of Donald Trump doing the Trump dance. And for the audio listeners out there, it's that same Trump dance that you guys are used to seeing. The Belgians are making fun of. This isn't the only time they even did it. They did it on the field. They did it in the locker room. They mocked Trump just like the rest of the world mocks Donald Trump every single day. The United States soccer team became the laughingstock of the world after that game because of Donald Trump, and only because of Donald Trump. He makes a mockery of this country. He makes a mockery of U.S. soccer. He makes a mockery of our standing. He makes a mockery of us at every single point in time. And speaking of which, you want to talk about being a mockery? The U.S. 250 celebration. Freedom 250. Should be an awesome celebration for all of us. We talked about a few things that were happening in last week's episode, and it somehow got worse. We got to play a few videos for this. I'm not going to lie. Here's one of the stage literally falling apart as there was some people doing some dancing. Lights, for the audio listener, lights falling off, hitting the stage, right? Here's a skydiver hitting the trees as the flag hits the trees and he goes tumbling into a beer tent. I wish I could play the audio for it. There was somebody just yelling, "Oh shit!" Right? Luckily, the skydiver was okay. I don't want to feel, I don't want to wish bad on anybody. The place had no AC. They've known there was a heat wave coming for weeks. They knew that thunderstorms were coming. They gave no shelter. People ended up having to shelter in the African American Museum, right? Which is, I don't know, a whole bunch of irony. Here's a couple talking about how it was so hot that they had to use the baptismal to go and cool off. They had a pool for a baptismal, and they had to use that to cool off. Listen to the clip.
Megan, you were just over in the medical tent being treated. Tell us about how you're feeling.
Now I'm fine, but previously, none of these booths have air conditioning. We don't know what happened, but I started seeing stars.
Oh, really?
And we went to the tent. There's a religious tent because that's the theme for today.
Yes.
And they had a pool. They're baptizing people. Thank God they had the pool. They said, "Do you want to get in?" I go, "Yes, I think I do."
I think I want to be baptized.
I'm soaking wet. But I went to the medic tent. They took care of me. I still got one of these towels. They filled me with electrolytes, but good
Nice folks in there for sure.
Oh, they're wonderful.
They are
absolutely excellent.
No, I don't know why there was a baptismal there. Talk about no separation of church and state. They've been talking about that a lot lately, okay? But this has been an embarrassment, okay? The World Cup has been embarrassment. America's 250 has been an embarrassment. All right. Donald Trump has done nothing but embarrass his country, and it seems like that's all he is going to continue to do. Make sure you guys are checking your voter registration. Make sure you guys are ready to vote this November. If you live in a state where they're trying to pass some version of the SAVE Act, make sure you have your birth certificate or your passport or whatever you need ready to go, so you make sure you're registered. Check your voter rolls and make sure that they haven't taken you off, okay? Hey, we have an excellent interview coming up with Nikki Gronley out of South Dakota, running for the House of Representatives there. You're going to want to stay tuned for that. So thank you guys so much for being here. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button or follow button or whatever it is. Leave a comment. Let us know how you think that it's going. If you like it, let us know. If you don't like it, let us know. Tell me what you guys think we should do about the situations going on with Graham Platner in the future and how both Democrats and Republicans should handle stuff like that. I love you all. I will see you guys next week. Make sure you guys are subscribed. We have a new episode every single Friday at 7 a.m. All right. Y'all have a great one. Bye. Federal trade courts have just shut down Donald Trump's tariffs after the Supreme Court already shut down his original tariffs. And this has affected many, many places across the United States since Donald Trump started his trade war with China in his first term, and it carries on into this one. Here to talk about that and many other things, we have somebody running for the House of Representatives in South Dakota. We have Nikki Gronley here. Welcome to the show. I appreciate you.
Thanks for having me, Christopher.
I know for a fact that some of the people that have been affected most by these tariffs are people in South Dakota. Soybean farmers specifically are one of the big ones, but many, many others. At the time of this recording, Donald Trump is getting ready to go meet with Xi Jinping out in China. The number one thing that they're going to be talking about is the trade deficit and tariffs and all the things that Donald Trump is trying to implement. Can you just give us like a little insight on how tariffs have affected your state?
Yeah, it really, of course, started last fall when we found out that we had lost soybean markets and that China wasn't going to be buying what they had in the past. And what we saw from that was, of course, kind of that depression of how much soybeans were going for, and also the fact that in the fall, as our farmers were taking soybeans out, it kind of turned into that kind of like rush to get it to a location to either get the sale, hope you had a sale already on the books and made, or you had a place to store it. And so that was kind of the initial shockwave that hit South Dakota, was all of a sudden we didn't have these markets. And at the same time, our farmers were watching Argentina and Brazil get those markets. For a lot of farmers, the conversations were, these markets aren't coming back to us. What do we do with our product? And you know, this happened in the first Trump administration, and so there was a lot of frustration, maybe a lack of believing that it was happening again. The other concern for South Dakota farmers is over time, when we think about all those tariffs that are going to be on metals and equipment, that means in the long run, equipment is going to go up. They can't replace their equipment. And when we think of food processing, the costs overall go up over time. Now we've seen the Supreme Court, of course, come in and say, you can't do it. And money is going to be returned. It's going to go to that top level importer who they can clearly on paper prove that the tariff impacted them.
Yeah.
But that doesn't help consumers. That doesn't help those who made purchases beyond that. It still hurts. And it also means so much uncertainty at this point. It's hard to plan a business, any business, or your farm markets and what you should plant when you don't know what's going to happen.
I have to ask you, are the markets coming back? I mean, I've seen, that China's been making deals with South America, like you just mentioned. China's been making deals, based off these tariffs for all sorts of products, but especially, when it comes to agricultural products. Is the market coming back? Should we expect to see any change coming in the future? Maybe after this meeting?
I'm very concerned about whether or not they come back with some sort of deal. Because even last fall, when China did come back and say, okay, we're going to make some purchases, Overall, I haven't seen much proof that we've actually completed those deals. And we see that time and again with this administration where they say, we've got a deal. But then if you continue to check into that, it's not actually on paper, there aren't signed trade deals, and we're not realizing the actual completed deal on it. So I'm concerned about, even if they come back and say that we have something, will it really happen?
Yeah, Donald Trump said he was going to do 90 deals in 90 days, and we've had, I believe, a grand total of 0 deals. I guess if you want to count the UK deal, you can say that there was 1 deal. But I think that there's there's a lot to talk about in that, because, you know, as far as like what I talk to, you know, with the people that watch my show, we talk a lot about, you know, about farmers, specifically like soybean farmers and the effects. What we don't normally talk about a lot is the equipment, right? Like, is all of the things that go around that, right? We talk a lot about, you know, if when we start a trade war, they shut off, you know, that China shuts off the imports, which shuts off the exports to us. They make deals with other countries, but the equipment that goes into that also, because like, and maybe you can answer this question, I don't know where a lot of that equipment is actually made. You know, that large, you know, agriculture, even small agricultural, you know, farms produce. Where are those coming from? Are they coming from the United States generally? Are they coming from one of our allied countries? Where are we seeing that from mostly?
Well, I think the thing we need to think about there is we have been a global economy. And the fact is, you've got metals for manufacturing, you've got parts and pieces that are coming out of China and these other partners that we have ended our trade deals with and placed tariffs on. So it is a variety, and things are either coming into the United States and being assembled here. Some things are coming over as a complete piece of equipment. So it's really, truly a variety. And you have the equipment piece, and then you also have the manufacturing piece. So if you've got something you need to replace and it's in a food processing plant, chances are you might be bringing that in from China to America to produce our food. So like I said, there are these downstream and alternative impacts that are going to be felt even with these rollbacks, because when any business, whether it was an implement, whether it was a food processing plant, were impacted initially by these tariffs, they may not be the one who actually sees the money come back to them. And they may be the one that had to adjust their labor, their costs, what they're charging consumers already. Like, the damage is already done.
You said that this started in Donald Trump's first term, right? And I know that we did see that, right? You know, and
Yep.
all of these things affected, you know, people in South Dakota their first term. And they still voted for Donald Trump in this election. And now they're seeing exactly what happened the first term, happened the second term. Help me understand that. I don't understand, you know, because it seems to me that if somebody was literally attacking the, you know, one of the larger, you know, pieces of the economy in my state, was attacking them the first time, I don't think I would be very apt to support them a second time. But it seems like people did.
Under the first Trump term, there was a massive bailout that was, you know, given to farmers to help them deal with the fact that they had lost sales and their markets had been damaged. And then, you know, we get into the Biden administration, and at that point in time, you're coming out of COVID, you still had inflationary issues, and it was still difficult.
Sure. Yeah.
Then you've got someone who comes along and promises on day one, I'm going to fix all these things.
Sure.
And so there's a little bit of historical ties to your party in South Dakota. It's been a very Republican state. And so you've got, you know, a lot of Republicans here who I'm sure, you know, had hope from those statements.
Sure.
Now we're seeing that it hasn't come to fruition, right? And it's causing a rise in bankruptcies. And I know from the farming perspective, I have seen a lot out of Iowa and Nebraska in the areas of bankruptcies. I'm hearing more struggles here than full-blown bankruptcy at this point in time. But the ability to get an operating loan for this season, I know, was challenging for farmers. And I did a farm town hall up in Britain, South Dakota, which is up close to the North Dakota border. And we heard about the challenges with operating loans and trying to figure out how they were going to get a crop in the ground this year. We even had a farmer who broke down crying at that event. And it wasn't about his farm. It was about a neighbor that he was trying to help. So, yeah, that's the point that we're at. And then you add in, of course, the situation with Iran and the Strait of Hormuz being shut down and what that is now going to do to farmers this year.
Yeah, and let's dive right into that because, we hear about the Strait of Hormuz being closed. Obviously, oil is a huge part of agriculture. 20% of the world is shut down. We're seeing prices go through the roof in the United States. But tell me how that affects, people, farmers in South Dakota, and how maybe there's other things within that Strait of Hormuz closure that we're not seeing. How is that affecting your constituents there?
Right when everything started to happen and the strait was closed down, one of the first things I heard about, of course, was the situation with fertilizer and the fact that 20% of the world's fertilizer markets come through that strait. And it's not necessarily that those fertilizer products were coming direct to the United States. They often are going to China and other countries, but taking 20% out of the world market hurts fertilizer overall. And it means those fertilizer prices went up rapidly. Talking to some farmers right away, I heard some who luckily had already had their orders in last fall or put fertilizer down last fall. And at this point in time, they're feeling pretty good about the fact that they made that move early.
Right.
But that didn't make up for the fact that diesel is so expensive and what it is going to cost per acre to put a crop in the ground because of diesel prices. Then you also have the farmers who they had not made that fertilizer purchase or application early. And that's going to further increase the cost of putting the crop in. I do have a neighbor that has decided he's going to go without fertilizer on his beans this year and take the lower crop production. He's kind of making a little bit of a bet by removing some of the input cost and still putting that crop in the ground and hoping that he still has a successful crop. So these are the kinds of decisions that our farmers are having to make and the situation they're trying to navigate, and it's uncertain what happens this fall.
Sounds scary, to be completely honest with you, because and I'm not trying to downplay the farmer situation at all, but when you start to see everything connecting, right? When you start to see these decisions are made, diesel goes up, fertilizer becomes less available. Okay, well now you're getting less yield, right? Or people aren't able to plant, or all these situations, or they're having to pay more in order to do that. Cool. Now that's going to start affecting people's grocery prices, in the store, because now there's less, there's less in the market to come out. So therefore your grocery prices start going up. So then you have grocery prices going up because it takes more to farm it. Then you have, more to deliver it because diesel's low. And it just shows how these prices, even if the war in Iran ended tomorrow, this is going to have an effect on U.S. prices for time. I don't know how much time, but for time to come, right? Because these things don't snap off, right? As soon as the war ends, like it does. The farmer they're talking about that's your neighbor that isn't getting fertilizer. If it stopped tomorrow, he's still not getting fertilizer. That's not going to happen, for this season. It's going to be long-term effects that happen from this. And I really hope the best for the farmers and your constituents in your in South Dakota, because I know this must be incredibly rough on them. 100%. You actually are very well positioned to talk about how rough these things can be and what farmers in South Dakota actually need. You actually served under the Biden administration. I am not going to mess up your title, so I'm going to let you say it. What was your title again?
So I was the state director for USDA Rural Development in South Dakota, which is really the economic development arm of USDA that keeps small rural communities thriving and supporting those farmers, because we need strong communities where our farmers are to make sure that there are businesses for them to shop at, implements for them to go to, and schools for their kids.
And so I read up on this before I talked to you. I didn't know this arm of the USDA existed. So let me start there. I didn't know that it existed prior to this. We have a certain understanding of what the USDA does, right? But I when I was reading, like, you guys do everything from schools, hospitals, broadband. Tell me, like, some of the stuff you saw out there. Tell me, how that money is really affecting people, and where it's going, and how the federal government is actually helping to build up these communities.
Since we've been talking about farmers, I'll visit first with a few of the programs of rural development that help farmers. Things like energy programs. There's the Rural Energy for America program that would allow farmers to come to the government, put in an application and say, I can save money by changing out my operation to solar or geothermal, or bring in a digester, which they use in the dairy industry often to take actual manure and turn it into an energy product. And so that was some of the direct work with farmers, is helping them. They would do an energy analysis of where their operation was right now, and then they would be able to work with us to look at what it could be if they changed out some of those energy sources. And the good news is, by doing that, then they're ending up actually putting more energy, into the grid. As you know, if you're overproducing, you're putting it back into the grid. And also saving money in their operation by not having, more expensive energy coming into it.
So you're talking about like real green initiative programs in farming.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Like we don't, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but that's so cool. Like we don't think about that, right? When we think about cleaner, you think about solar panels in your house, think about electric cars. You don't think about how rural, farming is being affected by green energy. And so there was actually a lot of subsidies that were going into funding these types of things.
Yeah. And we don't think about the fact that even when somebody is drying down their soybeans or their grains at the end of a season, that they're using this grain dryer. And a lot of those are old. They're based on propane and they're expensive to run. So even helping them get into more energy efficient equipment that is going to cost them less to run and be more productive were products of the Rural Energy for America program. Now, with that program, when the new administration came in, there instantly were cuts. There was a whole freeze for probably, it was months when they came in where they just said, nope, we're going to put a hold on this. We're not doing any more applications. And that program is hugely popular with farmers. They want to be more efficient. Who wouldn't? If you're running a business and you can save money by switching out equipment or getting into a new energy source, you want to do it. Sure. And so there was a period of time where they weren't taking any applications at all. I'm seeing a little bit of conversation on it now where it looks like they might start opening some of that up again. But I'm curious to see how the program evolves under them, especially when we know that the president is not a fan of wind energy. And wind was one of the ones that could be applied for. There is a hog farm over by Mount Vernon, South Dakota, that they got their approval, their award right at the end of my time at USDA. And I've talked with them recently, and everything is still moving forward there, which is good to hear, because they are going to go to a wind energy source for their hog operation to reduce, the energy
I don't
use.
mean to laugh. I
Yeah.
really don't. I just never would have thought. I never even would have thought about a hog farm running on wind energy. Like, it's just something that I wouldn't have put into my head or whatever. But yeah, the president has been very clear. Been pretty anti clean energy to begin with, but very anti wind energy. So it's just interesting to think about stuff like that. I want to bring up another part, because you dealt with hospitals too, correct?
Yeah.
When it comes, okay, so the Medicaid cuts that have happened. I've been told, okay, and I don't know, so I'm really asking. I've been told this is affecting rural hospitals. Are you seeing that?
Yeah.
How is that affecting you and your people?
So, we already know that rural hospitals have been struggling. When you think of our local community hospitals and our smaller areas, they are dealing obviously with less patients in the area that have health insurance. And that's the thing to get back to, is thinking about that health insurance, because often in a small community, you have limited numbers of large employers who are able to provide health care. It is often your local clinic or hospital, a school system, maybe an implementer dealership that has a lot of employees. But in America, if you're running a business and you have less than 100 employees, providing health insurance has gotten so difficult.
Yeah.
So now you've got these hospitals serving a large number of people who are either maybe using the ACA, they are using some local health insurance through an employer, and then there's a large number of unemployed folks.
Right.
We know that in South Dakota, with the ACA, about 60% of those on the ACA were small business owners or farmers. And when we're seeing them drop off, and we are seeing that drop off since the ACA premium tax credits were taken, we're seeing some drop off. And all of a sudden, these hospitals and clinics are dealing with a largely uninsured population. People wait longer for services. The services end up more expensive because they've held off on basic care. And it makes it hard to be profitable. Under USDA Rural Development, some of the hospitals that we were able to work with, or clinics we were able to work with, really came down to the federal government giving them very low interest loans, maybe some grant dollars to help them with modernizing a facility. I think of Mobridge Hospital in South Dakota here. They just really hadn't modernized over the years. They were built back in, I think, the 60s. And we know that door sizes were smaller. The ability to get wheelchairs around or be able to cart people, around was not thought of back then, right?
Right.
So we were able to modernize that facility. And at the same time, they're concerned about their customers just being able to have the insurance to be able to get the services.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. I mean, great stuff that you're doing out there. It is very concerning that, it's just crazy to me, because you look at a map, and like I said, maps don't vote, land doesn't vote, people vote, right? But you see a lot of areas in your state, in, like you mentioned, Nebraska and mentioned in Iowa, that, that, like you said, have long histories of voting conservative and voting for the Republican Party, and just seeing that same party is trying to take away things like the healthcare, take away grants and stuff for hospitals, trying to take away those types of things. It really hurts, because I mean, farming must be inherently dangerous. I've never done it, but it must just be inherently dangerous, and so having things like proper medical care, having the resources to be able to do stuff like that, I feel is just so important. I do have to ask, so are you pro universal health care, or what's your stance on that?
So I love the idea. I think that there's a lot of difficult things in the way of getting there. But what I do see is folks who want to start addressing different areas of healthcare and are more open to it. I think a few years ago, a lot of people were very, very opposed.
Okay.
And we are in capitalism, and we worry about our insurance companies. They make a profit. Our hospitals, are struggling, and patients are struggling. But our health insurance is part of our capitalistic economy.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you start to work on those issues? And I always say, bring everybody to the table. If we're seeing health insurance companies make huge profits, we're seeing them move the goalpost on their customers, then it is time to sit down at the table with them and say, people are paying for a product, and you suddenly have told them the prescription you've always gotten, we are no longer covering, or
Right.
we're changing the coverage of it.
Yeah.
That is something that we should be sitting down and discussing and saying, what are you going to do to provide these services for your customers? People are really concerned about large corporate health insurance.
Right.
And we have members of Congress who get this amazing selection of health insurance. They are able to choose health insurance from across the country. And you know how we're all in states and we're limited to what is offered in our state. There's all these rules around it. But are we truly making health insurance compete if 3 insurance companies get to be in this state and 3 insurance companies get to be in this state? Because when you look at them and you go out and you compare quotes, well, guess what? They're all about the same. That competition just isn't there.
Because they're all talking to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because they're all in collusion with each other.
We are one of the few countries on the planet, and I'm sure you know this, that medical bankruptcy is a large part of bankruptcy in America.
Well,
That
we're
is
the
what-
only,
know?
developed nation on the planet of 33 developed, wealthy nations that we call it. 32 of them have universal health care, right? We're the only ones that doesn't, and we're the only one with this level of bankruptcy to medical debt, or especially where medical debt is the number one cause of bankruptcy in the nation. And the insurance companies are supposed to be providing a product. They're not providing that product, obviously. If that's what's happening, they're obviously not providing that product correctly. And so sometimes we get a little too caught up in the details, and we miss good looking for great, and I think that we need to just start, that we need to just kind of be like, okay, everything stops. We need to fix this process right now. And I think that places like South Dakota are places that would benefit from something like that even more than much more populated places. Like I said, I'm from California originally. It's not hard in California to find a job that has health insurance, right? Most of them do. It's just, I remember when I first moved out of California, I didn't even realize that wasn't just a thing that happened, because it was so common where I grew up. But to hear hey, these are smaller companies, these are smaller, groupings of people, and so therefore it doesn't apply as much. And it's wow, that just seems like it would be so helpful to help the people there. Or so it doesn't, and again, it doesn't have to look like what the other 32 countries look like, just whatever our version of it looks like, that makes it that, USA, we got to be different on everything, right? If we find what makes us, makes it right for us, but puts patients first, not insurance companies first. And I think that's where we really need to push on that,
And I think that's such a great place for collaboration. Is let's stop saying it's me against a Republican colleague. Instead, their constituents in Nebraska, say, are dealing with the same issues we are dealing with in South Dakota. Let's bring people to the table and seek actual solutions. I just see so much lip service around this stuff. And we need to move the needle. We are the richest country on the planet, and health insurance is deteriorating our economy. I mean, think about it that way. And how do we have a strong economy? Working families have disposable income that they can go out and spend. Yeah. And, you know, the affordability thing is real, and people are feeling it in so many ways right now.
What's interesting, and you know, because I've talked to representatives and people running for Congress from many states in the United States, right? And it's really kind of crazy because it's funny to hear the difference between somebody that's running in a deep red area like you are, right? And somebody who's running in San Francisco or New York, right? Yeah. In places like that, it's the most progressive person that usually wins. You know, because you're in a very deep, you know, very progressive area, as opposed to like where you're running, where it's more come across the aisle and talk like that. So let's talk about coming across the aisle, right? Let's talk about that for a second. Again, you are running in a deep red spot. I don't remember how much Trump carried South Dakota by, but I remember it was a lot.
Yeah. It was
40 something points.
Yeah.
I think it was like 44 points if I remember correctly, or something in that range. And the seat that you're running for also, you know, carried Trump pretty significantly in 2022. Why should Republicans vote for you?
So, things to keep in mind right now, Americans are seeing that this administration hasn't kept its promises. Again, how many things were, you know, promised on day one? I'm going to fix affordability. I'm going to take care of inflation and all these things. And it not only has it not happened at this point in time, we're seeing statements like this week where our president's asked about fuel prices and those expenses, and the response is, I don't think about it. I'm not concerned with it.
Yep.
The American people are very concerned with it, especially when we think of young people who are entering the workforce, maybe just got out of college or thinking about marriage or starting a family. I've had so many young people who say, I don't know if I'm going to ever own a home. I don't know if I'm going to have the same life that my parents had. And it is because of all those pressures, those expenses that have gone up, and the fact that home ownership is another one that we've just seen dramatic increase in home prices. And the average home buyer is now 40 years old for a first-time home buyer. So people are just feeling ignored is what's going on. And when we crunch all the data, looking at a variety of polling and what's going on in South Dakota, we know that Donald Trump is underwater by 7 points in South Dakota when you take the state as a whole.
Wow.
Republicans, I want to say, are 54% favorable to him. But we have our Democrats, our independents, and our unaffiliated are really half of South Dakota. Wow. So the other great thing is I've had so many of your traditional moderate Republicans who are part of my campaign, volunteering on the campaign, donating to it, because they feel like there is a segment of their party that doesn't align with them, and that they're a little bit homeless, and you know they don't feel like their party necessarily left them. They feel like some folks have kind of taken over the party, and they don't have a home, but they do see a future where they can maybe get back to the moderate Republican group that they used to know.
Yeah.
So, I mean, those are, you know, the things that we need to keep in mind. I've done town halls all across the state, gave the example of Britain, South Dakota, and the Farmer Town Hall. I'm going to continue to go out maybe where Democrats haven't been, and get to know more and more South Dakotans and have good conversations with them.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And more that, I think that matters more than anything, really, truthfully, more than any policy, talking to people, getting to know people, having those conversations. To me, what it sounds like is I'm hearing you say that the needle's moving. I don't know if we don't know how much it's moving, but it's moving to a point. I think that's really, really amazing. I think that's really awesome. Yeah. You're doing great work out there. But thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate you. You've been so insightful on some things that I'm sure that a lot of people aren't familiar with.
Thanks for your time today.
Thank you for listening to the PolyPolitics Podcast on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.